Blog Talk Radio.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
To the balance. Actually, not really. See, I'm so used to doing that. Rick has the night off tonight. I'm typically the co-host of Breaking Rank, but you know me, Tom Marquis, El Presidente, host of The Balance. Obviously, we produce and put together Breaking Rank, but our executive producer, Rick-riggin, is the host of the show. So, just by natural standings, if you I said, welcome to The Balance. Welcome to Breaking Rank. Now that we've got all that cleared up, my name's Tom Marquis, El Presidente. 917-889-8516 is our digits. We're going to be talking week 2 college football, the Browns, and then we get into week 3 as well. But I tell you what, can we say best? I don't know if we can say best for depending on who you are. We're going to get ready to talk to Matthew-Embury from up in South Bend, WTSB. And I apologize, man, if I got it wrong. But up there in Notre Dame country. But, Rick was up there at the game as well. Ball State made a visit to Notre Dame. And certainly, I think Notre Dame totally miscalculated Ball State. And if you remember right, Matt, I said to you, Ball State definitely can give Notre Dame a ball game. What are your thoughts? Welcome to Breaking Rank, by the way.
All I can say is Notre Dame's offensive line needs some work. They can't rely on the fact that they have 2 top 10 NFL draft picks anymore. I think it showed. Leon Eichenberg, once again, struggled. Alex Barr, Sam Mustipher, Robert Hainsey. I don't think you can say anybody on that offensive line had a good day on Saturday. The defense did its job. The problem is they couldn't score. And when you can't score, you let a team, regardless of who it is, become a danger and a threat to knock you off, and that's what Notre Dame had. Thankfully, they got the win against Ball State, but I think it has called into question what they might achieve coming up against Vanderbilt this weekend. It could be another struggle for the Irish.
Well, absolutely, and I do apologize. Matthew-Embury's with 96.1 WSBT up in South Bend. Certainly the affiliate for Notre Dame Radio. Matt also does some work for us on the racing side on The Balance, and certainly jumps on with us here on Wednesday night to talk college football. We do college football called Breaking Rank every Wednesday night. 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock right here. We get you ready for the upcoming week. We'll break down the top 25. Amazingly so, in spite of the win and the marginable win was, hang on to the number 8 slot, Matt.
They didn't deserve to be that high in the first place. I think it showed. I'm surprised they stayed that high. Granted, I think the only thing that saved them is the fact that no one really played anyone of note among the top 10. Now, granted, Clemson had their time with Texas A&M, but beyond that, I doubt you could say that anyone was expected to be in any kind of danger among the top 10. And I think that's part of the reason why Notre Dame stayed that high. But even to give you a point, our South Bend Tribune Notre Dame insider, Eric Hansen, who is a voter for the AP, dropped Notre Dame 2 places, number 10 in his poll, for instance.
Yeah, I have yet to figure out the top 25 poll or how they do that. I guess it's kind of like figuring out a woman. It just can't happen. But I can tell you one thing. I'm very shocked that they are that high. Now, should they still be in the top 10 because it was just Ball State, air quotes? And let's remember that Ball State is a very good team. They come from the MAC. And let's also remember that the MAC that Coach Kelly also coached in the MAC. So they should have been very well prepared. I'm going to beat a dead horse here, Matt. I'm going to just continue to beat this dead horse here. But the offensive game plan from Notre Dame needs to be placed in a trash can and a match lit to it. I mean, in the ashes spread all over the visitor section. The offensive line, the offensive plan for Notre Dame is going to cause them problems unless they scratch it and start all over again.
Well, that's the thing. I think if the line play is better, I think they could get things done. I think the problem is when you're letting – I mean, Ball State was dropping 8 in coverage, and even then they were still getting to Wimbush with only 3 rushers. What does that say? I mean, that's not a good sign at all. And the fact that only 3 rushers were able to get through against the Notre Dame line to Wimbush, I think just says how bad they had. If their line play improves, they have all the tools they need at the other positions to have no problems. I think that's the one thing that's holding them back right now is the line play was so good last year. It's not nearly as good this year, and I think you've seen a difference in performance.
Well, Matt, one thing for sure that typically rule of thumb is in coaching, no matter what the team is, it goes down into the elementary ages, if you will. Usually when things don't go as planned, a coaching staff adjusts and goes back and to see what they know what works and try that. Clark Lee did that after the first drive, I guess, but the Irish defense came out and they were just soft. And so, I mean, I don't know, Ball State found the Achilles heel in the lack of adjustments with the offense that clearly was stuck in neutral, wasn't going anywhere.
I think the defense does not deserve majority of the blame here. Like I said, the offense needs to score. You can't expect the defense to hold teams under 10 points in Division I college football anymore. The way these offenses get so complicated and they have so many dual threats, it's impossible to do it. And I think you saw it even with Ball State that they struggled. I mean, they only gave up 1 touchdown, but even then, they let Ball State right back in the game when they scored that touchdown.
So let me ask you this. A win is a win is a win, and we always like to say, hey, it's in the win column. And at the end of the day, it's going to count toward the wins and losses when it comes to getting into the college football playoffs. If that happens, certainly strength of schedule comes into part of that. And Ball State is not what we would consider a strong schedule. Would you consider this to be a satisfying win or an unsatisfying win for Notre Dame's team itself?
Looking down the road, you can't be happy with what happened because obviously the opponents are only going to get tougher from here, and this is probably the weakest opponent they'll face all year. So from that standpoint, yes, that is not how you want to enter the majority of your schedule. But if they could bounce back with a much better performance against Vanderbilt, I think it's back to status quo at least until they start getting to the bulk of their schedule, the Stanford game, Virginia Tech being the 2 biggest hurdles that are in their way, at least in the foreseeable future.
Well, if you're a team like Notre Dame, you have to be successful in the special teams. And I think the special team struggled for a second week in a row. Notre Dame struggled in almost every phase of the special team. Yet again, this week there was a missed field goal. There was a kick out of bounds. Another really bad day for punting. The coverage there was okay, I guess, ish. The special teams have not shown up in 2 weeks, and they better show up against Vanderbilt, or we might have a situation where, believe it or not, the special teams could either keep this game close or cause Notre Dame to lose against the Commodores.
I think you could blame the Yoon kick on the wind. I mean, there was a pretty harsh crosswind that he had to deal with on that kick, and from 43 yards, that's a tough kick to make regardless, even if the wind is negligible. But like you said, though, Newsom's having his problems with kicking. I mean, he had a couple kicks off the side of his foot this past weekend, and week 1 it also had an issue. So you talk about a guy that's trying to make himself NFL possible for being a draftee. He certainly hasn't helped himself the first 2 weeks in the case of Tyler Newsome. But beyond that, I think the kick coverage looked better as opposed to the Michigan game. But, yeah, the punting part of the game, they still need to work on because they can't keep giving up field position because as good as your defense is, if you keep giving up good field or a short field to teams, they'll eventually find ways to score against you.
Well, one of the things that every team has to do, especially if you're in the top 25, top 10, and trying to get into the college football playoffs, you have to control the turnovers. Brandon Winbush was put in a position to succeed this weekend with the game plan. That said, 2 of the interceptions he threw were a result of bad decisions on his part. Is he the quarterback for Notre Dame? Should he be the quarterback for Notre Dame?
I think you give him one more chance. If he has problems against Vanderbilt where he throws 2 or 3 picks, then yeah, maybe you look at Ian Book at that point. But like most of my experts in college have said, I think it's too early to pull the plug and get rid of Wimbush in favor of Ian Book at this point.
Well, certainly we knew that there would be some gaps inside the offensive line. Obviously, Quentin Nelson not missing a beat coming here to Indianapolis to play for the Colts. So the offensive line is having their struggles. They've got to figure that out. And we'll see what happens. But as you mentioned earlier, the schedule only gets tougher going forward. And let's face it, Vanderbilt's a ranked team as well, and they're in the top 25 as well.
Well, we talk about that with Vanderbilt. Obviously, they are a team that's capable of pulling off upsets. You got a lot of interesting stuff. And, of course, you have a couple of players that are kind of raw in their safety department that one of them suffered injury in week 1. The other was kicked out for a targeting foul. So it'll be interesting to see if they're a little bit fresh to that point where they can be taken advantage of by, the wide receivers who we still have yet to see much damage from Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool. They're going to come sooner or later, and hopefully that sooner is now, looking ahead to the Vanderbilt game, because they need to be a potent threat. Otherwise, you're going to see teams starting getting aggressive, start putting more men in the box, believing and trying to shut out Brandon Wimbush, especially when he uses his speed. And I think that's another thing that in the Ball State game we did not see enough of, and that was Wimbush trying to run the ball.
Well, I can tell you one thing. Notre Dame fans are always the loudest fans in the group, except for maybe Ohio State fans and maybe Pittsburgh Steelers fans. But certainly everybody knows Notre Dame fans are very, very loud and boisterous. And they took no time going to Twitter blaming a lot of the game on the other topics that's Twitter. But Ball State got away with, if we're to believe what Twitter says, Ball State got away with numerous blatant holding calls right in front of the officials. The Cardinals ran 97 plays, and holding was not called a single time on one of them. Thoughts?
If you're worried about the referees, you shouldn't be playing. The referees are neutral. If you cannot control your own destiny and you have to rely on a referee's call to save you, you're not a real football team. I'm sorry. And if that's the excuse that they are giving for that, that's just poor thought right there and careless viewing if you're thinking that's the reason this game was so close. Notre Dame just did not look strong offensively, and that's all there is to it.
Well, let's get into week number 3. Notre Dame goes into Vanderbilt. I believe it's down in Nashville. But let's talk a little bit about Vanderbilt. Like we said, they're ranked number 14 as well, ranked team. And so far this season, Vandy is 2-0 and has outscored its opponents 76-17. Granted, those opponents were teams like MTSU and Nevada. But what you could glean from those 2 games, and what can you get from those 2 games, and what do you think about the rest of the Vandy season? How will it play out? And what do you think this team's ceiling is as far as looking at Vanderbilt being a top 25 team?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what Vanderbilt can do at this point. I think you look at the situations involving them. They're not the most dangerous team in the SEC. In fact, I don't believe they're receiving votes in any of the polls at this point, but I think you look at them, they are a viable threat because they play against top competition. I mean, it's no secret the SEC is strong. I mean, let's look at the poll for this week. I mean, for instance, Eric Hansen, even though they're only 16th in the top 25, he had Mississippi State number 9 in his poll. That would put 4 SEC teams, if you went by Eric Hansen's polling, in the top 10 from the SEC.
Well, let's look at the strengths and the weaknesses of Vanderbilt, if you will. Quarterback Kyle Schreiner, and how do you think he'll perform against very good but certainly not perfect terrific Notre Dame defense. We talked a little bit about the offensive line, but certainly the defense for Notre Dame Irish is pretty strong. Who are the best weapons at receiver